The message came through the Deep Space Communication Array at exactly 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee in the command center of Earth Station Alpha when the priority alert flashed across his screen. The sound was urgent, cutting through the quiet hum of the night shift like a knife. "Captain, we're getting a distress call," said Lieutenant Commander Lisa Barnes, her fingers dancing across the control panel. "It's coming from the Zephyrian Coalition, sir. Channel 1 priority." Morrison set down his coffee and walked to the main display. The message was already being translated by the computer systems. What he read made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians were dying. For 300 years, the Zephyrian Coalition had been known throughout the galaxy as the most peaceful civilization anyone had ever encountered. Their 12 worlds were covered in beautiful cities that grew like living things, made from plants and crystals that glowed with soft light. The Zephyrians themselves were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and large, gentle eyes. They had never built a weapon. They had never fought a war. They created art and music and medicines that could heal almost any wound. Now they were being destroyed. The message was from Ambassador Veltar, the Zephyrian representative to the Galactic Council. Morrison had met him once during a diplomatic function. The alien had seemed almost fragile, with his thin limbs and soft voice. Now that same voice came through the speakers, but it was broken and desperate. "To any who will listen," the message began, "the Krex Empire has entered our space. They have already taken 4 of our outer worlds. Our people are dead or enslaved. We have no armies. We have no weapons. We know only peace and creation. The Krex show no mercy to anyone. They kill our children. They burn our cities. They destroy everything we have built over thousands of years." Morrison felt his jaw tighten. He had heard of the Krex Empire. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were conquerors who came from a world of constant war. Their soldiers were huge, covered in natural armor that could stop most energy weapons. They fought with a brutality that made other species sick to watch. The message continued. "We have sent requests for help to all the major powers. The Altarian Defense Force says their shields cannot protect them from Krex plasma weapons. The Vorthan Collective claims their crystal warriors are too fragile for direct combat. The Centauri Federation says they cannot risk war with the Krex Empire." Barnes looked up from her station. "Sir, it looks like everyone is refusing to help them." Morrison nodded grimly. The galaxy was full of advanced civilizations, but most of them had grown soft over the centuries of peace. They had powerful technologies, but they had forgotten how to fight. The Krex Empire knew this. That's why they could conquer world after world without serious resistance. "Continue the message," Morrison said. Veltar's voice went on, now shaking with emotion. "The Krex fleet will reach our core worlds in 3 weeks. Millions of innocent beings will die. Our entire civilization will be erased from existence. Please, we beg anyone who will listen. We ask for mercy. We ask for protection. We have nothing to offer but our gratitude and our promise that we will never forget those who help us in our darkest hour." The message ended with coordinates and tactical data about the Krex forces. Morrison studied the numbers on the screen. 53 Krex warships, each one the size of a small city. Ground forces numbering in the hundreds of thousands. It was a massive invasion fleet, designed to crush any resistance completely. "What do you think, Lisa?" Morrison asked his second-in-command. Barnes pulled up more files on her screen. "The Krex are tough, sir. They're apex predators from a high-gravity world. Average height is 3 meters. They have natural armor plating that can stop most small arms fire. Their ships are built for overwhelming firepower rather than speed or maneuverability." Morrison walked to the large window that looked out into space. In the distance, he could see Earth, the blue and white marble that was humanity's home. Such a beautiful planet from space. No one looking at it would guess what kind of creatures it had created. "Pull up the Earth Defense Force roster," Morrison said. "I want to see what we have available." Barnes's fingers moved quickly. "We have the full Third Fleet in orbit around Mars. That's 12 destroyers, 8 cruisers, and the Dreadnought Retribution. We also have the 1st Marine Division on standby, plus the Special Forces units." Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Contact Earth Command. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate attention." Within 2 hours, Morrison was sitting in a secure communication room, speaking directly with Admiral Kate Sullivan at Earth Command. The Admiral was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen more combat than most people could imagine. "I've read the Zephyrian request. Admiral Sullivan said. "The other powers are right to be scared. The Krex Empire has been expanding for 50 years without a single major defeat. They're not just warriors, Jake, they're killers who enjoy what they do." Morrison leaned forward. "With respect, ma'am, that might be exactly why we need to get involved. If we let the Krex destroy the Zephyrians, who's next? How long before they decide humanity looks like easy prey?" The Admiral was quiet for a moment. "You know what this means, don't you? If we go to war with the Krex Empire, we can't hold back. We can't fight them with the same rules the other galactic powers use. This won't be a polite conflict with minimal casualties and negotiated settlements." Morrison nodded. "I understand, ma'am." "Do you?" Admiral Sullivan's voice was hard. "Because the galaxy thinks of us as the new species. The young race that's still learning how to be civilized. They see our diplomats and our scientists and our traders. They think they know what humans are like." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold as space itself. "They don't know about Earth, Jake. They don't know what it took to survive on our world. They don't know about the ice ages and the volcanic winters and the extinction events that nearly wiped us out a dozen times. They don't know about the diseases and the predators and the natural disasters that killed 99% of every human generation for millions of years." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. He knew where this was going. "They especially don't know about what we became when we finally reached the top of the food chain," the Admiral continued. "They don't know about human war, Jake, real war. The kind where you don't stop fighting until your enemy can never threaten you again." The communication screen flickered for a moment, then cleared. Admiral Sullivan's face was set in stone. "If we do this, we'll be introducing the galaxy to something it has never seen before. We'll be showing them what a real death world creates when it needs soldiers." Morrison thought about the Zephyrians with their gentle eyes and their cities of living light. He thought about the Krex Empire, burning those cities and killing everyone inside them. He thought about Earth and about what humans had learned in millions of years of fighting just to stay alive. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "the Zephyrians asked for mercy. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned the difference between mercy and justice." Admiral Sullivan smiled, and for just a moment, Morrison saw something in her eyes that would have terrified any Krex warrior. "Prepare your fleet." "Captain," she said, "Operation Death Strike is authorized. Show them what Earth sends when someone asks for mercy." The screen went dark, leaving Morrison alone in the communication room. Outside, he could hear the normal sounds of the station, people going about their daily business. None of them knew that in a few hours, humanity would be going to war. But this wouldn't be the kind of war the galaxy was used to. This would be something else entirely. This would be human war. Earth moved like it had been waiting for this moment all along. Within 6 hours of Admiral Sullivan's authorization, military bases across the planet were buzzing with activity. Ships that had been in maintenance suddenly had crews working around the clock to get them ready for combat. Soldiers who had been on leave were called back to duty. Supply warehouses that had been quiet for months were now loading cargo ships with equipment that most of the galaxy had never seen. At the Mars Naval Shipyard, Captain Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the EDS Retribution and watched his crew prepare for war. The Retribution was Earth's newest dreadnought, built with technology that human engineers had developed in secret over the past 20 years. From the outside, it looked similar to other galactic warships. On the inside, it was something completely different. "Status report," Turner said to his executive officer, Commander Dan Lewis. "All systems are green, sir," Lewis replied. "Weapons are loaded and ready. The new armor plating has been installed on all critical sections. We've also loaded the special munitions that Command requested." Turner nodded. The special munitions were something the galaxy had never seen before. Most galactic civilizations used energy weapons that were designed to disable enemy ships without destroying them completely. The idea was to force surrenders with minimal casualties. Human weapons were built on a different philosophy entirely. They were built to win. At the Luna Military Complex, Colonel Sam Parker was briefing his officers on their mission. The men and women in the room were not like the diplomats and scientists that most aliens had met. These were soldiers from Earth's most dangerous places, trained in conditions that would kill most galactic species in minutes. "Listen up," Parker said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "We're going to war against an enemy that the entire galaxy is afraid to fight. The Krex Empire thinks they're the toughest things in space because they come from a harsh world, and they've conquered everyone they've met." He clicked a button, and images appeared on the screen behind him. Images of Krek soldiers in their natural armor, towering over other galactic species like giants. "They're big," Parker continued. "They're strong. They're used to winning through intimidation and brute force. But they've never fought anyone from Earth." Staff Sergeant Maria Santos raised her hand. She was a small woman with scars on her arms from her years in the Amazon Death Corps, where human soldiers learned to survive in jungles so hostile that every plant, animal, and insect was trying to kill them, sir. "What's our primary objective?" she asked. Parker's smile was cold. "Complete elimination of Krek's military capability in Zephyrian space. No negotiations. No prisoner exchanges. No ceasefires until every Krek soldier is either dead or running back to where they came from." Sergeant Troy Mitchell leaned back in his chair. He was built like a mountain, with pale skin and ice-blue eyes that came from years of training in Earth's polar regions. The Siberian Cold Warriors were famous for being able to fight in temperatures that would freeze most aliens solid in seconds. "What about their homeworlds?" Mitchell asked. "We're not invading their territory," Parker replied. "But if they want to keep fighting after we're done with their invasion fleet, they'll learn why humans don't start wars. We finish them." Across the room, other soldiers nodded grimly. These were men and women who had grown up on a planet where survival meant constant vigilance. Earth had taught them that there was no such thing as a fair fight. Only fights you won and fights you lost. Meanwhile, in a secret laboratory deep beneath the Swiss mountains, Dr. Amy Foster was preparing equipment that would have horrified any civilized galactic species. Dr. Foster was a specialist in environmental warfare, the science of making planets uninhabitable for specific types of life forms. The Kreks evolved on a stable world with consistent gravity and atmosphere, she explained to her team. Their biology is adapted for their specific environment. That's also their weakness. She pulled up holographic displays showing Krek's anatomy. Their armor is keratin-based, similar to human fingernails but much thicker. It's strong against energy weapons and physical impacts, but it has specific chemical vulnerabilities. We can create atmospheric compounds that will make their armor brittle and eventually cause it to fall off. One of her assistants, a young man named Dr. Pete Collins, looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, isn't this a form of chemical warfare? The Geneva Conventions clearly state that—" Dr. Foster cut him off. "The Geneva Conventions apply to humans fighting other humans, Doctor. The Krek's empire has been systematically exterminating civilian populations for 50 years. They don't follow any rules of war because they don't believe in mercy." She turned back to the displays. "We're going to teach them that mercy is a luxury they can't afford to ignore." Back on Mars, Admiral Kate Sullivan was meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff in a secure briefing room. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also an undercurrent of something else. Excitement. For the first time in decades, humanity was going to show the galaxy what they were really capable of. Intelligence reports indicate the Kreks have 53 capital ships and approximately 200,000 ground troops, said General Ryan Clark of the Marines. They're spread across 4 Zephyrian worlds with their main fleet stationed at the edge of the system. Admiral Ben Rodriguez of the fleet leaned forward. "Our ships are outnumbered, but that's never been a problem for human forces. We're not planning to fight them ship to ship in traditional formations." Sullivan nodded. "The Kreks expect their enemies to line up and trade shots until one side gives up. They've never fought an enemy that uses 3-dimensional tactics in asymmetric warfare." She clicked a button, and star charts appeared on the walls around them. "Captain Morrison will lead the initial contact with a small force. His job is to make the Kreks think they're facing a standard galactic response. Meanwhile, the main fleet will position itself using stealth technology that the Kreks don't know we have." General Clark smiled. "And when they commit their forces to what they think is the main battle, we hit them from 6 different directions at once." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Humans had learned long ago that the best way to win a fight was to make sure your enemy never understood what kind of fight they were actually in. As the meeting broke up, Sullivan remained behind with her personal aide, Commander Jenny Wright. Wright had been with the Admiral for 5 years, and she knew that look on Sullivan's face. "You're worried about something." "Ma'am," Wright said. Sullivan stared at the star chart still glowing on the walls. "The galaxy thinks they know us, Jenny. They've met our diplomats and our traders. They think we're just another civilized species that's learned to get along with everyone else." She was quiet for a moment, then continued. "They don't know about the Great Wars. They don't know about the Black Death or the Spanish flu or any of the dozen pandemics that nearly wiped us out. They don't know about the Mongol invasions or the world wars or the nuclear standoffs that almost ended human civilization. Wright nodded. She had studied human history as part of her military training. It was a long, bloody story of survival against impossible odds. Most of all, Sullivan continued, they don't know what we learned from all of that. They don't know that humans don't just fight to win battles. We fight to make sure the war never has to be fought again. She turned away from the star charts. When this is over, the galaxy is going to see us differently. They're going to understand that Earth didn't create diplomats and scientists and artists in spite of being a death world. We created them because we're a death world. We know the value of peace because we know the true cost of war. 24 hours later, the largest human military fleet in galactic history left the Sol system. 15 capital ships, 37 support vessels, and over 50,000 of Earth's finest soldiers. They were heading toward a distant star system to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. But they weren't going there to fight for conquest or glory or political gain. They were going there because a peaceful species had asked for mercy, and Earth had decided to provide it. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened something that humans had decided to protect. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zephyrian territory like predators emerging from tall grass. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the tactical display update with enemy positions. What he saw made his blood boil. 17 Krex battleships were in orbit around the Zephyrian colony world of Vel Prime, systematically destroying the cities below. Green plasma beams lanced down from space, turning the beautiful crystal spires into molten glass. Each beam represented hundreds or thousands of innocent deaths. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Lisa Barnes, her voice tight with controlled anger, "I'm reading massive civilian casualties on the surface. The Krex aren't just attacking military targets. They're destroying everything." Morrison watched the orbital bombardment continue for another 30 seconds, then keyed his communications array. "Open a channel to the Krex fleet. All frequencies." The communications officer, Lieutenant Bobby Chen, worked quickly at his station. "Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to their entire fleet." Morrison's voice was calm and professional when he spoke, but everyone on the bridge could hear the steel underneath. "Krex fleet, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. You are ordered to cease your attack on civilian targets immediately and withdraw from Zephyrian space." The response came back almost instantly. The voice was deep and harsh, translated through the universal language matrix. "Human vessel, I am War Leader Thexkal of the Krex Empire. You have no authority in this sector. Depart now, or you will share the fate of these weaklings." Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all young men and women who had joined the Earth Defense Force to explore the galaxy and protect humanity's interests. None of them had ever been in a real battle before, but they were still human, and they had all grown up hearing stories about what their species had survived to reach the stars. "War Leader Thexkal," Morrison replied, his voice still calm. "The Zephyrians have requested our assistance. We are here to provide it. This is your final warning to withdraw." The Krex leader's response was filled with what sounded like laughter. "Humans, soft mammals from a garden world. We have studied your species. You are weak. You avoid conflict. You prefer negotiation to battle. You will run when you see real warriors." Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Negative, Krex fleet. You asked the Zephyrians for surrender. They asked the galaxy for mercy. The galaxy sent Earth instead. You're about to learn the difference." He cut the communication channel and turned to his tactical officer, Commander Steve Hayes. "All ships, battle stations. Execute Alpha Pattern 7. What happened next would become required study at every military academy in the galaxy. For the next 100 years, the human ships didn't form the traditional battle lines that galactic navies had used for centuries. Instead, they spread out in a three-dimensional formation that made no sense to observers. The Krex had expected the humans to position themselves between the attackers and the planet, presenting their strongest shields and heaviest weapons forward. Instead, human ships began moving through space in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated. They used the planet's gravity well, its moons, and even the debris from destroyed Zephyrian ships to mask their approach vectors. War Leader Thexkal watched from his flagship as the human vessels scattered across his sensor screens. "They run like cowards," he snarled to his bridge crew. All ships pursue and destroy. Show these mammals what happens when they challenge the Krex Empire. The 17 Krex battleships turned away from their bombardment of the planet and began to chase the human vessels. Each Krex ship was twice the size of the largest human cruiser, armed with plasma cannons that could crack a moon in half. They moved in tight formation, expecting to overwhelm the humans with superior firepower. They had never fought an enemy that treated space combat like a hunt. Captain Alex Turner, commanding the dreadnought Retribution from a position behind the planet's largest moon, watched his tactical display as the Krex ships spread out to pursue the apparently fleeing human vessels. All ships, he broadcast on the fleet frequency. Krex formation is now dispersed. Execute Wolfpack pattern. The human ships suddenly changed direction, moving with a speed and agility that shocked the Krex commanders. Instead of running away, they had been leading their enemies into a trap. Commander Dan Lewis, Turner's executive officer, coordinated the attack from the Retribution's bridge. Destroyers Charlie and Delta, target the enemy flagship's engines. Cruiser Boston, you have the lead battleship. All ships, remember your Earth history. These aliens think they're apex predators. Show them what real predators look like. The destroyer EDS Wolverine, under Commander Sarah Blake, performed a maneuver that would have been impossible for any other galactic navy. Using the gravitational pull of the planet's moon, Blake sent her ship spinning through space while maintaining perfect fire control. Her weapon systems tracked 3 different Krex ships simultaneously, hitting their weak points with precision that seemed impossible at such range and speed. The Krex had built their ships for overwhelming power, expecting their enemies to stand still and trade shots until one side was destroyed. Human ships didn't fight that way. They moved like wolves hunting a herd, striking fast and hard before disappearing behind asteroids or debris fields. War leader Thex Call watched in growing horror as his supposedly superior fleet began taking damage from enemies that refused to fight properly. "What are they doing?" he roared at his tactical officer. "Why don't they hold position and fight?" His tactical officer, a younger Krex named Subcommander Vexnar, stared at his displays in confusion. "War leader, they appear to be using 3-dimensional combat patterns. Our tactical computers don't have responses for this type of warfare." The battle continued for 27 minutes. When it was over, 7 Krex battleships had been destroyed or crippled, and the remaining 10 were retreating toward the edge of the system. The human fleet had taken damage to 3 ships, but no human vessels had been destroyed. Morrison opened communications with the fleeing Krex fleet. "War leader Thex Call, you have seen what happens when you threaten innocents under human protection. Withdraw from all Zephyrian worlds immediately, or we will pursue you to your home system and finish this." Thex Call's response was filled with rage and disbelief. "This is not possible. You are mammals, prey animals. How did you defeat Krex warriors?" Morrison's reply was broadcast not just to the Krex fleet, but to monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. His words would be repeated in diplomatic councils and military academies for generations to come. "War leader, you made the same mistake that every apex predator on our world made for millions of years. You assumed that being at the top of your food chain made you invincible, but Earth taught us something different. Earth taught us that there's always something bigger and meaner and more dangerous than you are." He paused, letting that sink in. "The difference is, we learned to be that something." As the Krex fleet limped toward hyperspace, their communications arrays intercepted data transmissions between the human ships. The translations were fragmentary, but what they understood chilled them to their bone marrow. The humans were calling this engagement a reconnaissance in force. They referred to the battle as a probe to test Krex capabilities. Most disturbing of all, they kept using phrases like Phase 1 complete and prepare for primary assault. The terrible truth began to dawn on war leader Thex Call as his battered fleet reached the jump point. The humans hadn't been trying to drive him away from Zephyrian space. They had been studying him, learning his tactics and capabilities while revealing as little as possible about their own. This hadn't been a battle, it had been a lesson, and now the real war was about to begin. On the surface of Vel Prime, the Zephyrian survivors emerged from their shelters to see human rescue ships landing in the ruins of their cities. The tall, graceful aliens watched in amazement as human soldiers worked alongside medical teams to dig survivors out of the rubble. Ambassador Veltar, his bioluminescent patches flickering with exhaustion and hope, met with Captain Morrison in the ruins of the planetary capital. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said, his voice filled with gratitude, "you have saved our world. We cannot thank you enough." Morrison looked around at the destruction, his face grim. "We're not done yet, Ambassador. That was just the advance guard. The main Krex fleet is waiting at their fortress world, and they still have 200,000 of your people as hostages." Veltar's patches dimmed with fear. "What can we do?" "They will kill our people if you attack." Morrison's expression was cold as space itself. "Ambassador, your people asked for mercy. You're going to get it. But the Krex are going to get something else entirely." He looked up at the sky where human ships were already preparing for the next phase of the operation. They're going to get justice. The Kex Prime system was supposed to be unbreakable. The Krex Empire had spent 50 years turning it into the most fortified position in known space. 3 planets surrounded by defense platforms, minefields, and the largest battle fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. 53 warships protected the fortress, world where war leader Thexcal had taken 200,000 Zephyrian civilians hostage. It was here that the Krex Empire planned to make their final stand against the humans. They had no idea what was coming. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the quantum communication from Earth Command. While her fleet was still 3 days out from the target system, the message was brief but clear. Protocol 7 is authorized. Full Deathworld doctrine approved. Show them what Earth creates. Sullivan stood in her command center and looked at the tactical displays showing the Krex defenses. Any other galactic navy would need a fleet of 200 ships to assault such a position. The humans were bringing 27. "Colonel Parker," she said into her communicator, "report to the flag bridge immediately." Colonel Sam Parker arrived 5 minutes later, still wearing his combat gear. The Marine commander looked like he had been carved from stone, with gray eyes that had seen too much war and hands that never seemed to stop moving. Behind him came his senior officers, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, Sergeant Troy Mitchell, and Lieutenant Carl Mason from the Desert Rats. "Admiral," Parker said with a sharp salute. Sullivan gestured to the holographic display of the Kex Prime system. "Sam, we have a problem. The Krex have hostages on their fortress world, 200,000 Zephyrian civilians. If we launch a direct assault, they'll start executing them immediately." Parker studied the display for a long moment, then smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't think that's our problem." Sullivan raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "The Krex think they understand warfare," Parker continued. "They think it's about who has the biggest guns and the strongest armor. They think holding hostages gives them power over us because that's how their enemies have always fought." He pointed to the 3 uninhabited planets in the outer system. "They've never fought an enemy that treats war as a science. They've never faced anyone who understands that sometimes you have to make things worse before you can make them better." Santos stepped forward. "Sir, are we implementing the full environmental protocol?" Parker nodded. "Everything we learned in the Amazon, Maria. Everything we learned about making hostile environments work for us instead of against us." Meanwhile, in the depths of space between the outer planets, Dr. Amy Foster and her team were already at work. The scientific vessel EDS Darwin had been modified with equipment that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Equipment designed not to terraform worlds, but to make them uninhabitable for specific types of life. "Initial atmospheric analysis is complete," Dr. Foster told her team through the ship's internal communication system. "The 3rd planet has a nitrogen-heavy atmosphere with trace amounts of sulfur compounds. Perfect for our needs." Dr. Pete Collins, her young assistant, looked worried. "Ma'am, the atmospheric processors we're deploying?" "They're going to create compounds that specifically target Krex biology. Isn't this against the laws of war?" Dr. Foster didn't look up from her work. "Dr. Collins, the laws of war assume that both sides acknowledge there are laws. The Krex Empire has been systematically exterminating civilian populations for 50 years. They've forfeited any right to civilized treatment." She activated the atmospheric processors, machines that began pumping specially designed chemical compounds into the planet's atmosphere. Within hours, the air itself would become a weapon against any Krex forces in the system. On the frozen 2nd planet, Sergeant Troy Mitchell and his Cold Warriors were setting up equipment that would have horrified most galactic observers. They weren't building bases or defensive positions. They were building launch platforms for kinetic weapons. "Temperature is holding steady at -40 Celsius," Mitchell reported to his team. Perfect conditions for the mass drivers. The mass drivers were human inventions, electromagnetic railguns that could accelerate tungsten rods to significant fractions of light speed. The rods themselves were harmless until they hit something. Then they released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons without the radiation. Most importantly, they were completely silent until impact. Back on the command ship, Captain Alex Turner was coordinating with the fleet's Psychological Warfare Division. Staff Sergeant Carlos Rivera, a specialist in breaking enemy morale, was preparing broadcasts that would be transmitted to every Krek ship and facility in the system. "Begin transmission," Turner ordered. Rivera's voice went out on all Krek's frequencies. Speaking in perfect Krek's dialect, "Attention Krek's forces. You are now fighting humans. We want to tell you about our homeworld." The broadcast continued for 6 hours, describing Earth in clinical detail. The Kreks learned about hurricanes that could level entire cities, earthquakes that could split continents, tornadoes that could tear apart anything in their path. They learned about ice ages that lasted for thousands of years, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, and meteor impacts that caused mass extinctions. "Our planet tried to kill us every day for millions of years," Rivera's voice continued. "We survived by learning to be more dangerous than anything trying to hurt us. We didn't become the apex predators of our world. We became something worse. We became the thing that apex predators are afraid of." The Krek's commanders tried to ignore the broadcasts, but they couldn't stop their soldiers from listening. For warriors who came from a stable world with predictable seasons and manageable dangers, the description of Earth was like hearing about hell itself. War leader Thexcall stood in his command center on the fortress world and watched his sensor displays with growing unease. The human fleet had entered the outer system but wasn't approaching his defensive positions. Instead, they seemed to be spreading out among the uninhabited planets. "What are they doing?" he demanded of his tactical officers. Sub-Commander Vexnar worked frantically at his station. "War leader, we're detecting unusual activity on planets 2 and 3. The humans appear to be setting up some kind of industrial operations." "Industrial operations?" Thexcall snarled. "In the middle of a war?" Before anyone could answer, alerts began flashing across every screen in the command center. Long-range sensors were detecting massive energy buildups on the second planet, while atmospheric analyzers were reporting strange chemical changes in the air around the third world. "Sir," another officer reported, his voice shaking, "we're also detecting seismic activity on the third planet. The humans appear to be targeting geological weak points with some kind of bombardment system." Thexcall felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career: genuine fear. The humans weren't attacking his defenses, they were changing the entire battlefield to suit themselves. "Send a message to the human fleet," he ordered. "Remind them that we hold hostages. If they continue their attack, we will begin executing Zephyrian civilians." The response came from Captain Morrison within minutes. "War Leader Thexcall, you seem to misunderstand the situation. We're not attacking you, we're preparing the battlefield. When we're ready, you'll have exactly one opportunity to surrender and release your hostages unharmed. If you refuse or if you harm a single civilian, we will demonstrate why Earth doesn't negotiate with terrorists." The transmission ended, leaving the Krek's command center in stunned silence. On the third planet, the atmospheric processors had been working for 18 hours. The air now contained compounds specifically designed to weaken Krek's armor and cause severe respiratory distress in Krek's physiology. Any Krek soldier who breathed the atmosphere would find their natural defenses literally dissolving. On the second planet, the mass drivers were fully charged and targeted at specific points on the fortress world. Not at the cities where the hostages were held, but at geological fault lines that human scientists had identified from orbital scans. The fortress world was about to experience its first earthquake in recorded history. Admiral Sullivan stood in her command center and watched the final preparations. In 6 hours, the Krek's Empire would learn what happened when they threatened something that humans had decided to protect. "All units," she broadcast to the fleet, "commence Operation Death Strike Phase 2. Show them what a real death world can create when it goes to war." The Kreks had asked for surrender. The Zephyrians had asked for mercy. Earth was about to deliver both, but not in any way the galaxy had ever seen before. The first earthquake hit the Krek's fortress world at exactly 600 hours, Galactic Standard Time. War leader Thek's call was thrown from his command chair as the entire military complex shook like a toy in the hands of an angry child. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the command center, while his officers struggled to understand what was happening. "Report!" Thek's call roared, pulling himself back to his feet. Sub-Commander Vexnar worked frantically at his damaged console. "War leader, seismic sensors are detecting massive ground movement across the entire continent. Magnitude 7.3 on the standard scale. But sir, this world has been geologically stable for millions of years. Earthquakes are impossible here." Before Thek's call could respond, another tremor shook the complex. This time, pieces of the ceiling began falling, and several of his officers were injured by flying debris. On the view screen, he could see dust clouds rising from the fortress city as buildings that had stood for centuries began to crack and collapse. "Sir," another officer reported, his voice shaking with fear. "Long-range sensors show the human ships firing some kind of projectile weapons from the outer planets. They're targeting specific geological points on our world." Thek's call stared at the tactical display in horror. The humans weren't attacking his military installations directly. They were attacking the planet itself, using weapons that turned the ground beneath his feet into an enemy. A communication alert chimed on his personal console. The message was from Captain Morrison of the human fleet. "War leader Thek's call." Morrison's calm voice came through the speakers. "You now have 30 minutes to release all hostages and surrender your forces unconditionally. If you refuse, we will continue geological bombardment until your fortress becomes uninhabitable. Your choice." Thek's call snarled and cut the communication. "Send fighters to attack those launch sites on the outer planets. Destroy their weapons before they can fire again." Vexnar looked up from his console with despair in his eyes. "Sir, we've already launched 3 fighter squadrons. They're not responding to communications." On the third planet, the atmospheric warfare had begun claiming its victims. Krek's pilots, who had seemed invincible in their armored fighters, were now struggling to breathe as their life support systems tried to filter out chemical compounds specifically designed to target their biology. Their natural armor, the pride of their species, was becoming brittle and falling off in chunks. Squadron leader Kex Von tried to radio his wing commander, but his voice came out as a painful wheeze. Through his fighter's canopy, he could see other Krek ships spinning out of control as their pilots succumbed to respiratory failure. The humans had turned the air itself into a weapon. Back on the fortress world, Colonel Sam Parker was leading the first phase of the ground assault. But this wasn't like any military operation the galaxy had ever seen. Human soldiers weren't attacking the heavily defended fortress directly. They were moving through the planet's underground cave systems, something that existed on Earth but was completely foreign to Krek's military doctrine. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos led her team through tunnels that the Kreks didn't even know existed. Her years in the Amazon Death Corps had taught her to move silently through hostile terrain where every step could mean death. The cave systems on this world were like highways to her, invisible paths that led directly under the enemy's strongest defenses. "Team Alpha in position under the power plant," she whispered into her communicator. "Team Bravo, what's your status?" Sergeant Troy Mitchell's voice came back through the earpiece. "In position under the water treatment facility. Ready to proceed on your signal." Lieutenant Carl Mason from the Desert Rats had the most dangerous assignment. His team was directly under the prison complex where the Zephyrian hostages were being held. "Hostage location confirmed," he reported. 200,000 civilians in holding areas 7 through 12. Guard strength appears to be minimal. They're more worried about attacks from above than below. Parker coordinated the simultaneous strikes from his position in a cave system that ran directly under the fortress command center. The Kreks had built their defenses to repel attacks from space or from the surface. They had never considered that an enemy might come from beneath. "All teams execute on my mark," Parker commanded. "Remember, we're not here to destroy everything. We're here to save the hostages and end this war." 3, 2, 1 mark. Across the fortress world, critical infrastructure began failing in precise sequence. Power plants went dark. Water treatment facilities stopped working. Communication arrays fell silent. But most importantly, the prison complex suddenly found its security systems disabled and its doors opening. The Zephyrian hostages, weak and frightened after weeks of captivity, were amazed to see human soldiers emerging from the floors of their cells. The humans moved quickly and efficiently, leading the civilians through the cave systems to safety, while Krek's guards ran around in confusion above. In the main command center, War leader Thexkal watched his fortress falling apart around him. The earthquakes continued every few minutes, each one stronger than the last. His communication systems were failing. His power grid was down, and now he was receiving reports that the hostages were somehow disappearing from their cells. How is this possible? He demanded of his remaining officers. They are mammals, soft creatures from a garden world. How are they defeating the greatest military force in the galaxy? Sub-Commander Vexnar, his armor cracked from falling debris, looked up from a portable console. Sir, I've been analyzing their attack patterns. They're not fighting like any military force we've encountered before. They're fighting like hunters. Before Thexkal could respond, the floor beneath his feet suddenly gave way. Colonel Parker and his team emerged from a tunnel that led directly into the command center. The Krex war leader found himself staring into the cold eyes of a human soldier who looked like he had been carved from ice and stone. War leader Thexkal, Parker said in perfect Krex dialect. I am Colonel Sam Parker of the Earth Defense Force. You are under arrest for war crimes against civilian populations. Thexkal reached for his plasma weapon, but found his hand shaking too badly to draw it. The constant earthquakes, the failure of his defenses, and the impossible appearance of human soldiers in his most secure facility had finally broken his warrior's confidence. This is not possible, he whispered. We are Krex. We are the apex predators of the galaxy. Parker smiled, but there was no warmth in it. War leader, let me explain something to you. On our world, we have a saying, there's always a bigger fish. You made the mistake of thinking that being the biggest fish in your pond made you safe from the ocean. He gestured to his soldiers, who quickly secured the remaining Krex officers. Earth taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest or the biggest or the most armored. It's about being the most adaptable. It's about learning from every fight and becoming better than your enemies can imagine. As Parker's team led the captured Krex leaders away, another earthquake shook the fortress. But this time, Thexkal understood what he was feeling. It wasn't just the ground moving beneath his feet. It was his entire understanding of warfare crumbling around him. 6 hours later, the last Krex soldiers in the system had either surrendered or fled. The hostages were safe aboard human medical ships. The fortress world was uninhabitable but not destroyed, a monument to what happened when someone threatened innocence under human protection. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and opened a communication channel to the fleeing Krex fleet. His final message to them would be recorded and transmitted throughout the galaxy for years to come. War leader Thexkal, Morrison said, you asked the Zephyrians to surrender. They asked the galaxy for mercy. We came here to provide that mercy, and we did. But we also came here to make sure that no one ever has to ask for it again because of you. He paused, looking out at the stars. Return to your homeworlds. Tell your people what you learned here. Tell them that Earth doesn't start wars, but we finish them. Tell them that there are some lines that should never be crossed. And protecting innocent lives is one of them. The transmission ended, leaving silence across the battlefield. Ambassador Veltar, rescued from the prison complex and recovering aboard a human medical ship, sent his final report to the Galactic Council. His message was simple, but would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The humans did not come to conquer, he wrote. They came to protect, but in doing so, they showed us what their world created when it needed warriors. They showed us why mercy is not weakness but strength, and they showed us that some species should never be threatened, because they have the power to remove threats permanently. The war was over, the Zephyrians were free, and the galaxy finally understood what Earth meant when it offered to help. They had asked for mercy. Earth had delivered justice, and no one would ever make the mistake of confusing the two again.